Hello and welcome to Infamous MCP, the audio podcast. This is Brandon or Mutilus on Discord.
This is Zach, go by Nitro Zeus on Discord.
This is Josh, I go by Grumelzog on Discord.
Okay, so I am here today with the brothers. As always, announcements. We don't have really anything new, sadly. Yep, links in the show notes. So let's go straight into currently playing. I am still playing my Apocalypse list. Sadly, I've not gotten to play since we last talked. I am excited to try some new strategies with them, though.
I've been playing Steve 3, really enjoying it. Also been wanting to dive into the Inhuman some, but really been enjoying some Steve 3 stuff.
I am still in person playing Asgard, trying to hone that list because it's what I like to play. I'm thinking of switching to X-Men soon, and on TTS I'm a Webs player now, so...
On TTS.
On TTS.
Cool. All right. Well, a couple weeks ago we talked about Mike DeLuca's list where he was running triple affiliation with, I believe it was Avengers, Asgard, and A-Force. I believe he's talked about this before as well, but we wanted to talk about it a little bit more. Is the merits of bringing multi-leaders in a list versus having kind of one sellout strategy. So I guess starting this off, do you guys have any initial impressions on this concept? Do you feel strongly either way?
I think it's a smart tactic to have. Like, you can probably build some tech in your list depending on if you pull your extracts or your secures, or what you're playing against. There's definitely some affiliations that the different leaders they have are very distinct, and so it gives you more of an advantage to have a secondary plan or a plan to counter your opponent, which is, I think, overall what DeLuca's was the leader was there to counter what his opponent was doing. It wasn't necessarily like his plan was just to counter them. So I think there's definitely affiliations like Avengers or Midnight Suns that call out to me of having both in your list and having an idea of how to play both probably is more successful than just having one.
So I'm going to agree with that for the most part. I've really been, as I've been trying to grow and get better at the game, start looking at, because normally I build a list around a single leader, and it becomes like, here's my core, and then here are my pivots depending on what I'm playing, just depending on what I see across the table, right? And I have started to look more and more at not only bringing a second leader in my lists, because pretty much everyone except for Guardians and like Dormammu have at least 2 leaders now, but also looking at bringing a different leader with a different affiliation that I think might play specific crises better or differently. And then just always the kind of, this is not a good strategy, don't do this. But just trying to psych your opponent out a little, right? Like if half my list is Asgard and then half Shield, they don't really know what I'm going to bring. And sometimes you might gotcha someone and they're like, oh man, I thought you were playing Shield. Well, I'm playing Asgard and that's not what you wanted to play against. So
yeah, I think those are good points. For me, I think the biggest concern I have is that as new like meta models have been released, and not like specifically just because they get played a lot, but models that are kind of jack of all trades, like the Namors, the Bills, the Black Panthers, which I know he's an old model, but he kind of fills every role. And so like Black Cat, Voodoo, people that just can find themselves use in pretty much any list that they get included in, create this problematic archetype of you really just have a core of 4 really, really strong models, and you're just building affiliations around them. And so all you need is a leader and a 2-pointer, or a leader and a 3-pointer, to just all of a sudden click that into affiliated. Especially, it seems nowadays a lot more models are affiliated with multiple factions. And so you can have, Black Cat's a perfect Grease model when she's in 4 or 5 affiliations. Spider-Woman was the same thing during her heyday, which has slowed down a little bit now. But yeah, it's really easy to get these models in a ton of affiliations, which makes it really easy to just accidentally your way into a good leadership. So that's kind of what I see people doing with this, and I'm definitely bad at adapting to this in current times. Is what my natural way of list building is I'll kind of decide what affiliation I want to play, and then build a squad around playing that affiliation as best I can. Kind of like what Josh was saying earlier, where it's like you'll fill in extra models based on like who you're expecting to play against. So I might throw in like a Mysterio or a Shang-Chi or somebody that's like, oh, this will be good against pretty much everyone I play. But then all you see is like, well, it's like Shang-Chi and this 3-pointer and this 4-pointer, and then it's like that's your whole list, and you're just building frameworks around that to gain different bonuses. And so, I guess let's go ahead and jump into it. Do you guys feel that you need any particular affiliations in the current meta? Like, do you need access to certain leaderships that you think really help?
I want to say yes. I think that having played Asgard for like, oh god, we're almost at like 7 months, 8 months straight now. There are like, we've talked about this at the store, Brandon. There are inherent weaknesses where you run up against something and you're going to lose because it's at the top of the meta, right? And that generally tends to be people with a lot of board control, a lot of stealers, and not that Asgard has bad board control, but if someone steals something from you, your only option is to try and daze them or kill them and get it back. You have no other way of doing it. And so I've kind of felt like I need to have that pivot, and I feel like it's also maybe been like that thought has been skewing my list a little bit, just because I have done what you talked about where I'm like, okay, I want to play Mighty Thor. Well, that immediately means like Valkyrie and probably Sif, and I'm affiliated. Then I want to take 1 or 2 models that I know are good, maybe 3 that I can plug in to hit like threat cap. And then I now have spots open that I'm looking at. Why don't I drop webs in my list or something else, something cheap that I can get affiliated really easily, so that if I come across webs at the other end of the table or criminals, I can more easily pivot to something I think I have a better chance with.
So I think for me, it's shifted some. It's been a while now, but the tactics card changes in like the third quarter of last year. There were so many generic ones that I felt like it used to be easier to dual affiliate and be like, oh, I'm going to run X Force, X Men because I know I'm going to have 4 really strong unaffiliated cards that kind of go into either list. Um, I was playing Brotherhood, but would try and I was trying to splash in a little bit of Cabal because I had, I really needed to just take Dark Reign and then some of the unaffiliated cards, and it was really strong. I feel like now with there being a lot less unaffiliated, I focused more on mono affiliate or less generic tactics card. I focused less on dual affiliating, which really surprised me about Mike's list. But hearing him talk about it, made a lot of sense. But I focused more on kind of like what you said, Brandon, of like playing one affiliation, because then like what suite of tactics cards you're going to bring, and that helps build around it. Having multiple leaders in that has definitely been good. I think for Wakanda, they've got a lot of leaders, but they don't really have a lot of great ones, and so that's been kind of tough. Like I do have multiple in the list, but I kind of gravitate towards M'Baku all the time, and then kind of build out around his leadership or models that synergize well with the tactics cards. But that was something I felt like was a big shift, was losing the generic tactics cards. At least for me in the short run, felt like the dual affiliation was much tougher to get because you needed to bring 3 shield cards or character specific cards that may not overlap very well into another affiliation. So I didn't know if you guys felt that way also when those cards rotated out.
I felt that the rotation of cards has made it a lot easier to dual affiliate because there's so many less like character specific cards that you don't feel tied to specific characters as much. And honestly speaking, most of the affiliated cards are not very good. Like there's usually 1 or 2 defining cards, Like, well, usually when I'm building a roster right now, I feel like I'm struggling to get to 10 cards. And so it makes it a lot easier if you're doing dual affiliation or even triple affiliation because you're like, oh, Asgard. Well, I can really just live with Odin's Blessing. Rainbow Bridge could be fun or a number of other cards, but you really just need the one. Like A-Force, for example, you need special delivery. You don't really need A-Force Assemble. You don't really need Stalwart. Like, they're very nice, but depending on your strategy, you might not even be doing a dogpile model and it's not useful. Same thing with Avengers. Like, obviously, Avengers Assemble is insane, but like, how many of those other Avengers cards do you really need? And like was it Battlefield Strategy or whatever the cap card isn't even
Battle
affiliated.
Plan, yeah, it's just Steve.
Battle Plan, yeah, it's not even affiliated. Like, who cares? And so I feel like actually the adjustment in tax cards has paved the way for this multi-affiliation pile.
I'm going to heavily agree with Brandon because specifically with Asgard, Odin's Blessing is the only card I ever care about. And I would say, actually, since the tactic card changes, I probably have 3 or 4 what I just call like dead cards that I'm just filling space. Like I have to bring 10. I
Never
bring
gonna see
3
it.
or 4. They're not even a consideration. I'm still it's a weird thing. They also kind of warped. They got rid of a bunch of generic tactics cards, but now there's just like 4 everybody brings. Like, I'll be completely honest, I did not know Warpath even existed before the tactics card bans. And now I'm just like, well, why wouldn't I bring Warpath every game? Like, it's going to be useful. It's going to do a thing for me. But with that ability to pivot, I do agree that I think the dual affiliation rosters need to be looked at more because, like I said, with Asgard, I bring Odin's Blessing, I bring my 2 restricted, and Mighty Thor, Valkyrie, Sif, and I'm there. I can play Asgard. Well, that's still technically, 7 other tactics cards and 7 other characters. So why wouldn't I look at bringing something else that lets me pivot?
So I'll kind of expand and ask both of you then, if you're looking at the multi-affiliation, I mean, are you going with sort of the easier path of just, I have extra tactics card slots, I have 3 models that also overlap with Shield here, or Josh, for your example, A-Force, so is that a direction you look at? Or is it more, I think, Brandon, you were focusing more on, these are really strong models, and so is there another affiliation that I can bring 2 of those models and then put Voodoo or Black Cat in, and they can do really well there? So kind of which direction do you guys go with that?
So for me, moving forward, looking at this from the perspective of can we utilize the multi-affiliation, which is not normally the way I approach it. I've definitely built lists with that in mind before, but it's not my go-to. I would say that I would look at what kind of strategy I want to play. For me right now, it feels like there's either like the super high tempo board control lists, or sorry, like model control lists where you're really just trying to assassinate opposing models. You see that a lot with like the Malekith style of play, or the CGR style play, where it's like I need to kill specific models on specific timings to gain advantage. The other way is scenario rush, is like the 2 major strategies I see right now. And so you basically, in my opinion, you would pick one of those, and you would pick the 3 universally best models in the game at doing that strategy, and then build outwards from there, almost like a skill tree. And so, obviously, if they have overlapping affiliations, that's great. If not, you just have to build them in. And so, let's say you're starting with like efficient like fighting. He's like, so you're gonna grab Shang-Chi, probably Black Panther, and Zemo. And like that's just a good core of models, and obviously you can have a different variety of models that you choose to build from. And so those 3 models just as a base core are very strong. And building outwards from that, okay, well, none of them are directly affiliated in an affiliation I'm aware of. So now I just need to build good affiliations that support them around the concept that I need to get affiliated with 3 models. And then you're just going outwards from that. So pick one. Let's say you wanted to do Cabal. You could also do Defenders. And so let's say from the Defender side, you throw in Daredevil 1 and Wong. It's like, so now you got Daredevil, Wong, Shang-Chi, Like you're close to being, you're already affiliated if you throw in the other two guys of Zemo and Black Panther. So you're already there, and now can you build multiple other branches that solve different problems? And I think that's actually not too hard to do. And that's how I would approach this, given what we've been talking about.
So yeah, pretty much that. When I first started looking at the idea, I was looking at a ton of overlap. Like looking at my shelf right now, I know I can be like, you know what? Avengers, Shield, and A-Force are basically one big circle. There's a ton of overlap there. But as I've tried to grow and sit and think in the game, I want to pivot. Like, if I want to fight, I'm bringing my Asgard. So if I want to board control and do objectives, I need webs, or I need someone else that does what I'm not normally doing, because outside of just playing it for fun, I don't think there's not enough rock, paper, scissors to what teams play against what teams to justify, like, okay, I brought a Killy Asgard list, but in the same list I also brought a Killy Cabal list. I just feel like that's a waste of energy to have those overlap. Like, you have two Killy teams. Just make one really good Killy team that's going to dominate and do what you want to do according to your game plan, and then find your scenario team. So that's how I look at it. I have also debated many times. I drew up a list, and this is a point I'd like to make too. It really depends on the affiliation, because some affiliations have a ton of overlap and some don't. Like, almost all of not Web Warriors, Spider Foes are Criminal Syndicate. Like, it's almost a perfect circle.
Every
right?
Spider Foes squad ever fielded is also criminals.
Looking at my Shield list, Nick Fury maybe is not an Avenger. Like, Shield is basically a sub-faction of Avengers.
Yeah.
But then
same with Hydra and Cabal.
Right?
Yeah.
And then like I said, I drew up a list with just mutants. You can play 6 different affiliations, all in one thing. So that's
X-Force, X-Men, Brotherhood,
Weapon X, the whole thing.
Apocalypse.
Now, is it good? No. You know what? I should change out Professor X for Apocalypse, and then I can play 7 affiliations in one list. But
that's interesting. So are none of the Horsemen leaders? They aren't, right? Cable is.
Magic is a leader. Cable is a leader.
Magic's technically a leader. Okay, so there's at least 2.
Technically X-23. But she's on a Horseman, is she?
She's not.
Wolverine is an unaffiliated Weapon X leader.
That's true. You have Honey Badger. I don't think you have enough to get affiliated, though.
For which one?
Oh, to get affiliated with Weapon X. Because technically Wolverine's a leader.
Not the one
Deadpool,
I have.
Colossus.
Honey Badger, Deadpool.
Honey Badger, Deadpool.
Sabretooth's in there.
But he's not Weapon X. Dumb.
He's not Weapon X?
No, only Apex is.
Oh, okay.
It doesn't make any sense.
Oh, okay. Oh, you get to take the better Sabretooth? Oh, no. Like...
No.
But Apex
but he's not a horseman. That's like, so if you were playing Apocalypse, you'd have to have only 4 horsemen. You couldn't have more.
I think if you sat and looked at it, you could bring 7 affiliations in one list and just go, what am I playing today?
I'm sure you could get it legal. I don't know if it'd be good, but it'd definitely be legal.
Yeah, I have Magneto in there. That should clearly be only because he's in Hellfire now.
Right.
But that could be Mystique, who I think is also Hellfire.
So back to the advantages of multi-affiliations. I think the biggest thing for me that a lot of people overlook because you're so sold on what you're playing. Let's say, for example, you're playing Avengers with Steve 1, and you're sold on Avengers and you love Steve 1, or pick a leader, it doesn't really matter. But how often in the history of you playing that affiliation with that leader has there been, well, I only took this model to get affiliated, or I only took this model because he's the leader. And you got the leadership, but you're down a model because you have a 4-point albatross that's giving you a leadership. And the leadership might be good and it might synergize with your other models because you built it with the leadership in mind. But could you have switched it to another 4-point leader that's a 4-point model? And so the difference there is you're gaining a 4-point model for a slight downgrade in leadership. And that's probably been 30% of your fucking games over the history of the game. And now the game is in a place where doing a multi-affiliation, where you're maximizing the power of your individual models over the power of your affiliation, I think that might be valuable, right? Like, oh, well, let's say you're playing webs, and for whatever reason, you're doing fighty webs, and all of a sudden, you don't need to be fighty webs. Like, I don't need, all webbed up. I don't need Ant Maze. I don't need Spider Tracker. And all of a sudden, you just drop 4 models for Guardians, and now you're running Star Lord and Rocket and Groot, and you've only changed out 3 or 4 models and a couple Tactics cards, but the list is completely transformed into 100% gas, and it's much better at range than maybe a Web Warriors combat list is, because Web Warriors are much more up close fighting, and so you now fix the problem of like, well, maybe I got into a Weapon X matchup and I can't fight them at close range because they have Pierce and they get through my defense, and so you can switch over to Guardians with a bunch of energy attacks and totally change the game. Or, for perfect example, also, like maybe you're playing Weapon X as your core, but then you lined up against Convocation. They've got 5 models with Mystic attacks, and it's a completely different game.
6,
you don't want any part of
I
that.
believe.
So all of a sudden you switch out. Now I'm playing Defenders with Shang-Chi, who gets like all the bullshit against Mystic, and you're like, this got a lot easier. And so how many of those times have you just not built in an actual second pitch that was possible in the same list?
So I would say when I look at it for what crises I'm going to play, not what I'm playing against necessarily.
I think it's pronounced crises.
Crises. But you get what I'm saying? I'm like earlier I stated, I'm trying to look at lists like, okay, I got my reds, I played this part of my list. Oh, I got my blues, I played this part of my list. And it's the same thing. Like, obviously, I might get my blues and my opponent has a red I really like with the team I'm running for my extracts, so I'm going to play that instead. So I think it's really more, for me, I'm looking at it at a crisis level, not a matchup level, because you can guess what your opponent's going to play, or like anytime I play Zach's Wakanda list, I know what he's going to play. But there's too many variables that I think you really need to focus on what the information that you have to build a list to start the game.
I think Zach's Wakanda list is a perfect example of the way I used to build lists, or still do really. And it's find your strategy, build one affiliation with every tool you can imagine you might need to do that job as best as possible. And then just do your thing. And that's how that's my natural instinct when I go to build rosters. I haven't really changed from it because it's been mostly successful. And so we're talking about getting outside your comfort zone and playing differently, obviously.
Yeah, I would say that too. That could be some of the lens that I have. That's exactly how I built the Wakanda list. Is like, I'm gonna play this. These are the core models. I'm gonna bring all the different tools that I need in whatever variety that comes up. And so that's probably why I've focused less on it. But I think, like, just even this conversation has me thinking about, could you build very different affiliations together? Like, there's a ton of overlap, like we've talked with foes and criminals. Where you could have, this is going to be a fightier game, so I'm bringing Doc Ock right here. Or, no, this is going to be a scoring game, I need the points, so I've got Kingpin. I think that's one people have probably built, but my thought that I've got coming out of left field at me is an Avengers and Midnight Suns, and kind of like we've talked about, bringing the really strong models like Shang-Chi, Voodoo, Black Cat, who each have their own successful way that they can navigate Steve 1, but then maybe also giving them an opportunity of like, well, maybe they also, Black Hat and Voodoo are affiliated in Suns. Maybe there's a way those models can also play with Blade as the leader. And so there's a different way, depending on, do you need the Steve 1 tempo immediately, or does your opponent have a ton of control and you're going to need to be able to bump back into range to do stuff? So that's something that's my mind's kind of spinning on right now is, looking at two affiliations that do very different things, and seeing how you can put those together, like you said, to have a second pitch.
Yeah. It's very anti my natural instincts because I will almost always default to an affiliated option that's slightly worse. over the better model. Let's say, for example, Valkyrie versus Zemo is a perfect example. I will always take Valkyrie in Asgard over Zemo because for me, the part of the game is like the thematic part of it. Like being able to play an Asgardian squad is a cool, fun thing for me, as opposed to just going, this is a blank data sheet that's worth 3 points, and this model is technically better than this model. No one's arguing that Valkyrie is worse than Zemo. But how often have you made that concession? Because what if I need to get affiliated at this weird point total? And outside of 50 games of grinding of every possible point total against every possible opponent, have you realized that you don't need that affiliated model? And it might even come down to the order in which you build your squads, which is one reason I recommend people use list builders, because a lot of them will recommend different squads. If you're like, well, I have to have these 3 models, but what else should I play? And you'll see combos that you never would have thought of because of the way you build your squads. Like when I'm doing it, I'm like, all right, well, I need my leader. Here's my leader. And then I go, I want this model and this model because they're my best affiliateds. But if I looked at it in reverse, I could have taken a different affiliated and swapped the model I liked out for a model that's technically better. And I would never have considered that just because the order in which I built my squad. And so I think that's another angle we might be missing with doing this multi-affiliation.
So maybe a little off topic, but Brandon, I have a question for you.
Mm.
When you go to build a list, do you start with a leader? Do you start with a concept? Or do you start with what you think will be fun to play?
My normal go-to, I would say I probably choose an affiliation, although that choose an affiliation for someone who's been playing since inception is usually picking a leader. And so like when I go, I want to play Avengers, I would be pretty open to playing any leader in Avengers, but generally there's one I want to play, which is what has driven me to this point. Because when I look at an affiliation, like when I look at Midnight Suns, part of what I'm looking at is I'm excited to use Bump. When I look at Asgard, part of what I'm excited to do is use, like, Mighty Thor's leadership. And looking around that can change. Like, some are definitely more flexible than others. Like, when I look at Cabal, I know there's multiple leaders I can play. But yeah, so I don't know that there's a hard line on what I pick, but generally it's I have an idea of what I want to play. I would say that is usually an affiliation with a strong lean towards one of the leaders. But I definitely would never walk in going, I'm not going to play X unless it's just completely different than my style I want to do. Like, obviously, I'm not going to play Sin. I've played all the Sin I need to play. I know that I don't enjoy that strategy. But it's a perfect example of, like, maybe having a 3-point leader in Cabal is all you fucking need and everything else is irrelevant.
Yeah. I think something that I might try and dojo or theorycraft is, like you just talked about, focusing more on one leader when you build, and maybe trying to go, okay, I want to play Steve, and then think about, or Sam, whoever, I want to play Steve, think about the kind of style that he plays, and then maybe the thing I'll do is immediately go, okay, what is Steve not good at? What does he struggle with? What do models and Avengers struggle with? And kind of have the second model be, okay, here's another leader in a different affiliation that fills in the gap that I'm missing, and then trying to see what kind of overlap I can get with models that work well with both of those leaders. I think that's something that could be successful rather than building out one affiliation or one plan and then building the second pitch. Like, just start off immediately with, these are the 2 pitches that I want to have. How do I get these to function together in a list?
I
think sorry, I just want to jump in before I forget this point. I think one of the perfect examples of this concept is when Namor and Zemo were being paired together everywhere. Is I have my core of strong models and I'm going to find somewhere to play it. And I think that's like the truest version of what we're talking about here. And it's just the natural conclusion of that thought process is I'm going to take a strong core of models and exploit that core in different ways. Go ahead, Josh.
Yes. Yeah, so that was kind of the point I was going to make as well, is when you look at a dual leader list, you need to find who pairs well together. So, like, I was trying to get a shield list to work, an invaders steel list. That was actually just Webs wearing like a face mask in a dark alley, because I had like Miles and Black Cat and Spider Woman and then Namor Zemo right? And like I was obviously affiliated,
Mm-hmm.
but then I started looking. I was like, okay, well, I'm one step away from being able to play webs because I already have Miles and I've got Black Cat and I've got Spider Woman. Shield has great cards, but I don't need to take 10 Shield cards, so I
Slamming
can.
Gwen.
Yeah, I slam in Gwen, bam, like I'm there. And then I quickly realized the list was. I was not playing webs out of pride, I guess, but it was. I realized that I could do a thing, and the more that I stacked around it, the more I realized that, like maybe I needed two leaders that did different things. Because if I'm playing Namor with the intent to like steal, right? Because Namor can make you drop and steal, Spider Woman can make you drop, Cat steals, all of that. And then I also had a webs pivot. I was like, well, why am I doing the same thing twice? And I thought the shield list was really interesting. I ran it for almost an entire TTS league after they killed my Winter Guard. And that when I would run into something that I needed to fight, that list just folded. That list folded right away because I didn't build in anything to fight. And Shield is fighty. Like they've got the tools to do that.
But
So
you took all the shield tools that don't really
fight,
for, like,
and then
except for Namor.
I just got folded every time I needed to fight. It'd be like Hulk's on the table. What do? I don't know. I only steal. Like I only do this one thing. I don't run away from him.
And then you saw why webs are good because they stand up to that really well.
Yeah, exactly. And so that's definitely like after that list really made it click that I was like, I think if when you're doing it, you should have a pivot. You need to understand that you can do two things. There is enough wiggle room with if you're a good list writer and you know what each model does, there is enough wiggle room for you to have a game plan for multiple things that will occur to you.
Yeah.
So he's not here, but I would want to give Parker credit for. It felt like this was really a core concept of his Hulkbuster list. He would go, oh, I'm playing into Asgard. Well, I'm definitely going to play Hulkbuster because I'm just going to nerf all of your throws. But then he obviously had Sam in there. He may have had Steve in there. I don't recall. And it was like, well, depending on what it looks like the archetype of your team is, then I'll just pivot and play this other thing. But if you've got a ton of throws, then there's maybe no one better than Hulkbuster to deal with that. So that's what I'm going to do. And especially like at Adepticon too, it seemed like he was kind of surprising people with that some. So Parker may have been ahead of the curve on this.
I don't think that's anything to do with what we're talking about, but you are not wrong in your analysis. You're just wrong in the fact that it's at all similar to what we were talking about. I think that's definitely a big thing when you have a potent leadership or a potent model that people don't play against. Like, just imagine if nobody had ever played against Malekith before. And even in his nerf state, somebody puts like go wide team against him, and like Weapon X is a good example, like some go wide Weapon X list, and they just run at him, and you're like, bro, I have Red Skull, MODOK, and Malekith, and you just like, and they just run X-23 forward. He's like, all right, I move charge you, and he's like, oh, okay, that's a long charge, large, medium. Twice is a big distance, and he just one-shots her, and you're like, okay. And then, Red Skull moves into range 3 of somebody who's already activated, and you're like, huh. And then that guy gets obliterated, and you're like, and then MODOK moves into range 4 of a different guy, and here comes the Mystic attacks. You're like, huh. And like, you just, feed your whole list to him. You're like, wow, that was crazy strong. You're like, yeah, you just don't know what the abilities do. You're going to walk into a lot of rakes, right? And so obviously the Dark Horse can be very powerful in that regard.
So I will say, I had that when I was playing my Winter Guard list, because no one plays Winter Guard, and I was running Malekith. And so people will be like, cool, I'm going to go stagger him. Or I beat 2 Lost Legion players because they go, cool, who's incinerated and gains a power went? Malekith. And they're like, oh, shit. I just gave him the power to charge, and I was only like 3 wide, so I had priority. I immediately ditched the incinerate because of Winter Guard leadership, and Malekith just ate everybody's lunch across that entire board. And it was just because, like, the 2 guys I played against are like, oh man, I haven't played against Winter Guard in forever. Like, this will be an interesting game. And It was.
Hold on a second. Is Mephisto's leadership the enemy gains power?
Yeah. And then you
Both.
gain 2
You
power.
pick your model to get incinerated and gain power.
I did not. CJ probably explained that better than I remember it, but to my knowledge, what he said was, you choose someone to get incinerated and I gain a power. And I said, okay. And I just did that the
No.
whole game. I assumed he was getting power and I wasn't.
Vastly wrong.
That is way worse.
Yeah.
That is so much worse. And you know who I kept incinerating was Magic, and I was like, man, I really wish she had enough power to play
Yeah.
some attack.
Damn, if she had 3 more power right now.
Yeah, if she had like even 1. I only needed 1 more. Okay, it's good to know.
Okay, yeah. Read your tactics cards, folks. That's very important.
It's not my tactics, it's his tactics.
Read your
card.
opponent's leadership.
And again,
Tactics
he
card.
probably explained it just fine,
Yeah.
but I'm in the middle of learning, Apocalypse, so I'm like not really paying attention to anything he says. I'm reading my cards. Okay, so the next wrinkle with this whole thing is obviously yes, but how much do you think the new crises have affected the ability to do this multi-affiliation like matrix build with the fact that there's only 15 missions that aren't 17 points? Because there's 25 missions in the current pack according to it's 24 in the current pack according to MCPDB, but 10 of them are 17 points. And so that's like more than a third of the field. That's like 40% of the field is 17 points. Not to mention, most people build for 17 now anyway, so even if you don't get to pick points, and there's more than one option, your opponent's probably picking 17 anyway.
I think that goes to where you talked about having maybe a leader in another affiliation that's the same threat level. Of like, I'm going to swap out this 4-threat leader for this other 4-threat leader, but I still get to keep, the 2 really strong models that I want in here. Like Shang-Chi, where it's like, all right, well, he's Avengers and Defenders. So you might play Steve, or you might play Daredevil, but you're keeping the same threat level, and that might make it a little easier if you build around that idea that you're like 17's what's most likely. So I need a leader. My leader, even in different affiliations, needs to be the same threat level, or I need to know exactly what the package is that I'm swapping out. But I think if you were playing, you were trying to do multi-affiliation that had different threat levels, like if you were trying to do X-Men and X-Force, and you're like, well, I'm going to play Storm and Cable. It's like, well, you're having to make some very big adjustments there to go from a 3-threat leader to a 5-threat leader. So that might be something of, like, again, Avengers and Defenders, where you might be able to, the leader is always going to be this threat, and that might be the beginning kind of package that you build around. Is, I know I have a 4-threat leader, I know this model's always affiliated in both, and then this is what I need to build off of it. Might be something that could work.
So I will mostly agree with that. I think it is very affiliation dependent, right? Because you using a ton of overlap models, let's say like you said, Storm Cable. Well, there's an objective list and a kill list, right? Using a lot of models that pivot in between each other. But with Brandon's point, I think that with how many 4-threats we have now, because it feels like every box is just 2 4-threats anymore, or a 5 and a 4-threat. I really feel like you can take almost any affiliation and go, okay, my 4-threat leader, my good 4-threat, a good 3. Now I'm affiliated at 11. And 40% of the field is 17. I need 6 more points. That's another 4 and a 2, or a 6, or 2 3s. And there's enough models out there now that I think if you are like, I have this battle plan for these objectives, you can make it work and basically still have another 5 slots in your list for an entirely the opposite pivot.
The transformation, yeah.
Yeah, so it's like, okay, I've got my 5 objective. Well, now I get to build a list of 5 attrition. 10 models. Maybe there's some overlap between the two. Everyone loves Zemo. Pretty much everyone loves Namor. He's a little expensive, right? There are 3s that are fairly fighty. There's a ton of good 4s that can do either role. And I think it's just really sitting down and asking yourself, what do I want this portion of my list to do, and who am I going to use it to do that?
So I'll say there's been a lot of time in the past of the game, especially with the tall meta we had for a while, that the point total was incredibly important, and they usually wanted to keep it as low as possible because their archetype for their list was my supermodel of like Thanos or Malekith or CGR plus a leader. That's a set point total. So those two models combined are X, right? It's commonly it was like 11 points for those two models. Then the rest of the points has to be filled by one model because you need to only be 3 wide. So it happened a lot that you wanted to keep that at usually like 15 points because you wanted to throw in a 4-pointer and be done, or maybe a 5-pointer. But if it started getting too tall, it started getting weird, where you would have these really awkward combinations, and now you'd be doing like a 3 wide build as against like maybe a 6 wide build, which is a totally different game than 3 versus 4 or 3 versus 5. And so because of that, that's why research was leveraged so hard for a long time and all that, which most people are familiar with. But looking at it in reverse, how often has it been that because you had your one plan, you got stuck into building a list where it's like, well, I don't really want to play 2/2s, but I have to be affiliated because my 4-pointer I have isn't affiliated. Or maybe it is, but that wouldn't give me the model count I want. And so you end up building these like making sacrifices in your model selection for that reason. And what Zach was talking about earlier, like difference of Storm to Cyclops, or not Cyclops, excuse me, Storm to Cable, big difference in leader cost, right? You're looking at going up 2 points. 5-point leader is much harder to get into a squad. But because of that, maybe that just means that I'm playing X-Men on 17-point missions. I'm playing Cable on 20-point missions. And it's just that kind of flexibility you're looking at. And so I think this has been a really interesting conversation, and I definitely have been more excited now to do squad building than I have in a long time. And looking at this as a different perspective, because the way I've been list building to this point, which we talked about, is like pick something and do it as best as you can, or maybe occasionally do dual affiliations and stuff. But that's almost never get to play the models I want to play. And looking at it in reverse of just going, here's the 4 models I want to play. How many affiliations can I get out of this? Or how many different strategies can I play around these same models? Because obviously Zemo and like Shang-Chi can be in any list and be useful, regardless of your strategy or your archetype or your build. And they're just too good to not be utilized. And so if you just built it in reverse, like it's basically the old Hellfire Club list before it kind of got taken over as like start with the 4 models you want to play, slam in a leader and go. And now we have more unaffiliated leaders than we've ever had before. Like you could just throw in Dracula. It's like, hey, guess what? I'm fucking playing Dracula. Get over it. And you just move on. And obviously, Dormammu is a whole different conversation because he's 8 points. And Hellfire Club's been nerfed. But there's still 2 that are completely open with 4 and 5-point leaders. I guess they're both 5s, but yeah.
So I will say, list building wise, I have been more excited than I have been in a while. But I'm also because Brandon, you and I build lists the same way, right? I like what I do is I'm like, okay, I want to fight, I want to play this affiliation. These are my leaders. This is probably the most fighty leader. What can I do to make that shine? And I'll bring 10 models that make that shine. But what I've actually been doing now, and like I've been playing my Asgard list at the store, I have been trying to find like what works 80% of the time, every single time under this leadership, and what is my chaff? What model am I not bringing ever, or I bring 1 in 6 games? Because those are the models that I'm starting to look at to shed from my list. And once my list is very polished at, let's say, 6 models, right? I go, cool, I have 6 models. I have a plan for almost anything that's going to happen. But I still have 4 slots. That means I get to start experimenting with other things in the list or adding to the list to have new plans to pivot against. And maybe I play those 1 in 4 games, right? But it's still having that option to change things up. and maybe make my opponent second guess, right? That I find really exciting. And unfortunately, a lot of this with the dual, or even I think I have a triple leader, not the silly 7-leader X-Men list, triple leader list floating around somewhere, is kind of challenging myself to find like, hey, this is the best model that overlaps to do the thing I want to do. Hopefully, it's not
Yeah.
Black Cat, because I like to keep a shred of honor, and really trying to push my lists and push myself to know what I want to play and when I want to play it. And I've noticed when I do that, I've started to become a better player.
Yeah, nothing makes me more angry or lose the will to play a game faster than like basically feeling like I'm being told of what to play. And that's happened a lot over the last year or so, with the meta being shifted in a new direction and a lot of older models losing their valuableness like to affect the meta anymore. It feels like the newer models that have been coming out have just been completely invalidating older models. And I really dislike that feeling. Just going like, hey, I love this model, but like it's just out of the meta now. Get over it. Like Magneto's a perfect example of that. Like basically telling me you can't play Magneto because he's not good anymore. And nobody's saying that, obviously, but that's how it feels. Like you try and put it on the table, it's like this model is clearly designed for a different game, a different era of this game that doesn't exist anymore. The game is so much faster than it used to be that he just can't affect the game. And he's just an albatross in any list you put him in, which isn't fun. And so that has been a big deterrent for me, getting into doing this stuff. And so a good way for me to probably combat that is by starting with just, I want to find models that are still useful, even if I don't play them a lot, and finding ways to utilize them. And so I'm definitely excited to do that.
What I'm excited for is, like, I know, my Wakanda list that I've probably played 50 or 60 games now. I know in building it and when I, go to play like a specific threat level, that it's become like, oh, well, it's this list of models. And there's been, Okoye is great. She's a 2-threat. She's affiliated. Everybody thinks Okoye, I think, is good. But there's definitely games where I go, well, I'm playing her so that I can become affiliated, so that I can play these other 2 models. And it kind of has me intrigued of, rather than forcing her in, when I'm trying to fight, again, she's a good model. It's not like I'm playing something horrible. But rather than trying to force her in, looking at it and going, well, what if I took out, like, I don't play Namor a lot in my list for a number of reasons, but what if I took Namor out and put in a leader from a different affiliation and maybe 2 tactics cards, depending on what it was. And rather than going, well, at this point, at this threat level, I need to play Okoye so I can be Wakanda affiliated, I pivot and go, well, rather than playing Wakanda, why don't I try and play Hydra or Cabal or something else?
Mm-hmm.
So that has me excited to that, of when I'm putting a model into a list or looking at a list I already have, rather than going, they're here, so I'm affiliated at X threat level, kind of like we talked. Well, why don't I look at just what's the best models I can play right now or like play at that threat level, if I can have the ability instead to pivot to a different affiliation. So that's something I'm curious about.
I'm going to let's just make a list of models that we think are like ubiquitous meta models that should probably be considered in every squad right now. Let's just go around the table, starting with Zach. Give me a model that you think fits that description. Who
Zemo.
is a meta staple?
Actually, I'll say Black Panther 1.
Panther 1. All right, you're already wrong, but that's fine. Josh.
Mighty Thor.
What's wrong with you people? You think that she is included in every roster right now?
I think if you're trying to kill people, you should be including her.
I think he's thinking more ubiquitous, like Zemo, Shang-Chi.
Yeah, these are models in every roster, not models you like.
Bill.
Bill is a fair example. That's fair. Okay,
it's
Bill.
Boring, but Bill. Yeah.
That I agree with that. I'll say Shang-Chi because he's fucking everywhere right now. Zach.
I'll say Zemo because he's always Zemo. Good.
Josh.
Miles.
I don't think Miles is anymore. I think Miles was for a long time. I don't think he is anymore. But I don't think it's a bad choice.
I said it with some trepidation, but then I was like, I did a quick roster. I'm like, he kind of does all the things I'm like looking for someone to do, and like he's a dated model
Sure, he is
now,
a
but
generalist for sure.
he's
That's why I would said Panther.
he's
So
middle
he
of the
can do
pack
whatever you
generalist.
want to do, Panther
Yeah.
can do.
Yeah. Okay, so I'm going to say Black Cat, and let's do one more round. Zach.
A model that should be in every list. Or should be considered for every list.
Should be the 10th model in any roster it's not included in.
I feel like you're going to disagree with this, but I really think Cable is phenomenal. I think Cable can do
I
a ton
do
of things.
disagree with Cable, mainly good that he's a 5-pointer.
That is a fair counterpoint.
I will also
Josh, do you have another one?
probably trigger Brandon. I'm going to say Nebula because it's a 2-threader that just slides in there, and she's a heat.
Yeah, but that's a very one-dimensional model. Is the problem? Is what I'm saying is it needs to be a generalist, like something that is so good
Then
as like no weaknesses.
Wong, the other good 2-threat.
Let's not look at twos. Let's
Okay.
look at. Let's keep it in like the 3-4.
Okay.
range.
So if it was gonna be a 3 or 4 range,
yeah.
I'm looking at my
Because it needs to be includable in any swap.
models right now.
I'll swap Cable out for Lizard.
I
think
really
Lizard can do a lot.
Well, but he only does one thing, right? He only
That's
doesn't
fair.
die. That's all he does.
I really
Like Iron Man would have been an old example, and I still think Iron Man is has been forgotten, and he shouldn't have been.
I think so too.
Like the fact that he
Yeah.
brings Helios, he's a 3-point model that has a range 4 attack that pushes any size. He has damage reduction. Like he has no weaknesses, right?
maybe Bold.
And he's just been forgotten because there's new models out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Maybe Bold. Sam Cap.
I think Sam is a good.
He
What about
has a
Rhino?
little.
He
Still
is
feel like
hugely underutilized as a splash model. I played against him like 3 or 4 times as a splash model. It's endlessly infuriating because you like mentally identify his problems of his kit with Avengers, and when you have to deal with that shit when he's playing in Inhumans, you're like, what the fuck?
Yep.
Like, wait a second, he's actually airdropping people because he has power, and you're like, oh no, and he's charging on the first turn. You're like, this guy is fucked.
He's one of the like 5 3s that when I build a list and I'm looking for like what to slot in there, I look at Sam because I'm like, he's just so good.
Mhm.
He kind of does everything you want him to, and he's just so good.
would you include Rhino on this list? Or do
I
you feel like
would
he's a
have
little
before
lizard?
the adjustment. I think he's still really good. I would put Logan on there first. Logan is such a nightmare to fucking deal with.
How that model's a 4-threat, not a 5, I don't understand. But
I really don't
I
understand.
really
Yeah,
don't.
He should just-
Mystic.
He should just not contest. He should be like Nebula, doesn't contest, can't pick up, and he'd be fine. But as is, he's absolutely insane. Honestly, Nightcrawler should probably be on this list. He's absolutely crazy.
I want
I was
to
thinking
try
about that
him
too.
in Asgard so badly.
But nobody plays him outside of X-Men. It's like nobody even considers
It's because
it.
of I think power. You want to find a way to get him a lot of power.
There's a ton of affiliations.
And there
that give out a lot
are,
of power.
but people just don't think it through
Yeah.
because they're looking at their own. Kind of what I said way earlier. There's so many 4-threats now that you can easily find them in your affiliation, and I don't think people realize how tuned up he is and your
Is
ability.
Psylocke still on the list?
Yes. Oh yeah. Psylocke.
I'm
is
picking Psylocke.
phenomenal.
All right, we have one from Zach still. Zach, you get a pick. You still want to go with Rhino? I don't think he's a terrible choice. Rogue was on the list for a while.
Rogue is probably another model I would say in consideration with like Nightcrawler that she does so much. People just overlook her for something that's more specific, but like she has such a great spot in that she can do just about anything you need her to.
Yeah, Spider-Woman and Gwen are both.
I was going to say
my
Gwen
short list.
next. Yeah.
Yeah, Gwen is. People are again so used to only playing her against her in webs that when you put her with any other leadership, because she's honestly the model that utilizes leadership least because she almost never gets attacked because she's so far away. But like all of a sudden you put her in affiliation where she gets bonuses and you're like, oh wait a second. It's like, oh, you just play her with Steve 3 and she like always pushes and you're like, what? Okay, so you're gonna say Gwen?
I would say Gwen.
Okay, I'm fine with Gwen. This is interesting because I thought we would have gotten a different list, but I don't know if maybe I just didn't phrase the question right. I think Black Panther, Shang-Chi, Zemo, Black Cat, Psylocke, Gwen are definitely like a second tier. Black Cat's amazing, but she does two things, right?
Yeah.
She can control and she can
There are definitely
survive.
teams she's not as good in.
Yeah, there's plenty of games where she's not absolutely the best model ever, but if you're playing Scenario, she is in my opinion, still the best model in the game.
Agreed.
If you're trying to win on Scenario and you don't have Black Cat in your roster, I don't know what you're doing. Okay, so then thinking about this, this should be able to build the core of any good team, I would say. And that doesn't mean that they're not the most thematic models in there. Like Bill is obviously not exciting, but what he does is very important. I think Shang-Chi and Zemo are probably the most generalists on this list.
I mean, I would argue that
Zemo
Zemo is the ultimate generalist because everyone likes rerolls. He's very cheap to slot in anywhere, and for 3 threat, he can stand on his own. Right? I've definitely clapped Zemo multiple games, but there's some games where Zemo's like, reroll, cool, I'm good. Like you spent 2 attacks attacking me, and I'm alive. You did nothing.
This is very interesting. I thought we would have a very different list here, but I don't disagree with our list at all. Yeah, I definitely would have personally put Logan on here, but I just think Logan is so overtuned.
Like I said, I played a guy at Adepticon who had never played against him, and he did his beam attack or whatever. He had
the guy was like, "What the fuck?"
Oh, I one-shot his Apocalypse, and I one-shot... Magic is easy. I one-shot a singular attack rounded his Apocalypse with Logan. And he was like,
You're also playing Guardians. You had over-the-top rerolls.
Yes. And he's like, I didn't know he could do that. I was like, I'll be honest. This is my first game with him. I didn't know I could do that either. So...
I also didn't know I could do that.
This is news to both of us, brother.
Mm-hmm. Okay. This is interesting. What I'd like to do for our next episode, if you guys are on again, is sit down and kind of experiment with this.
I'm down.
And so really just sit down and go, what is our strategy, right? Is our strategy to build a good generalist roster or an attrition-based roster, a scenario-based roster, and do that and sit down and just build the whole roster from the ground up and see how that naturally happens with 3 people doing it.
So we can add this to the list as well, of podcast topics. But a long time ago, I used to play Warhammer, and there was this talk I listened to that I always found really fascinating. And it was the debate of, can you build a generalist army, in this case a list, or do you need to skew into things when you're playing competitively? And I always found that a fascinating question, because a generalist list can kind of play against everyone. But generally the stuff that is the meta and is winning is I do this one thing obsessively well, and it's so hard for everybody else to deal with.
Yeah. I would say in MCP, no, you cannot. But that's because the meta we live in right now in MCP is so swing. The range is so wide, and what wins the game is very narrow. Because the game is so short right now, the game ends on turn 4, maybe on turn 3, so often that you don't really get the opportunity to play the game, in my opinion, the way it felt like it was originally designed. And obviously the devs are in charge of it, so it's kind of up to them to make it what they want. But the experience you get now is nitrous octane compared to what it was 3 years ago. The game is so much faster. And it just feels to me like I don't get to experience the full game anymore. But yeah, I don't think it's possible here. There are games where it is 100% possible to build a fully generalist list where I'm trying to take on everything. In MCP, what I mean by generalist is have access to multiple avenues of victory.
Yeah.
And so you were talking about earlier, hey, I got my 6 models I need to play attrition. Can I bring in 4 more models that will allow me to play scenario? And in my perspective previous to this conversation, I always felt like that was a waste because you're always going to lose to the guy who spent 100% of his resources to win on scenario, and you're going to lose the guy who spent 100% of his resources to win on attrition. You're never going to do both because you could build a squad that can fight that guy, and you can build a squad that will scenario battle that other dude. But because of the variant point totals and deployments, you'll never be able to do it as well as the person who has options. And so that was my opinion up till today. And I don't know that I still disagree with that opinion, but I would love to see this taken to its natural conclusion as well.
Yep.
I'm
definitely
for it.
down to build that.
I
list.
love a
Did
good
you,
brain teaser. So,
is it out on the podcast file somewhere?
Is what?
The list of models we just came up with. I didn't know if you'd put them.
Oh, I would not use this. I was just curious as a mental.
Oh, I got you.
Yeah. I would say we can talk more tomorrow. Are you guys gonna be at the shop?
I probably.
I've got my TTS game, so I won't be, unfortunately.
Okay, so you're a bunch of losers. Got it. All right. So we'll talk and basically come up with what we want to do. I know I personally want to do like a hyper aggro list with this concept. Like put in all the high tempo pieces, kind of like what I was doing with Asgard, where I had like 5 charging models in my list. It's like I was going 5 wide, all 5 people had turn 1 charge available, and it was just like, I'm just gonna go get you, and we'll see how it goes. And it was fun, but it was super inconsistent, right? Mm-hmm. You'd have games where you just ran people over. I did that against CJ. I just got the hot dice. Then my game against Quentin, when I really needed the dice, I got nothing. I did 0 damage with 5 charges. I was like, cool. I guess we'll just move past this. And so yeah. We shall see. I would love to do that myself, and then we'll talk about what strategy we want to go into for our group build next week.
I'm down.
Yep.
All right. Well, thank you for tuning in, everybody. This has been Brandon.
And Zach.
And Josh.
And you've just listened to Schizophrenia.
So what are we going to call this thing?
I got it. Okay. Incredible, new, fantastic, astonishing, mighty, original, uncanny, sensational podcast.
I'm just going to put down infamous.